Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. So welcome to The Future Starts Here, a conversation with Mayor Helen Godwin. Just to do a bit of an intro, the event is part of the Urban Transport Next podcast series, conversations that help shape the future of transport. These conversations are hosted by UTG, Urban Transport Group, who are the UK's network of transport authorities. And I just want to say now a big thank you to Atkins Realis, who supports this series of conversations. Atkins Realis provide holistic end-to-end advisory services for many combined authorities and regions across the UK. For those who don't know me, I am Jason Prince. I'm the director of Urban Transport Group, and I'm delighted to be sort of doing the Graham Norton for Transport job of hosting this podcast. We've had a flurry of podcasts recently, a mix of transport ministers from both England and Wales and mayors, and I'm delighted today to welcome another mayor, a leading light, shall we say, to the series, who I'm going to put some questions to. There'll also be an opportunity for you, the audience members, to ask some questions. So if you just put those in the Teams chat and then we will pick a few. And you can also join on X by using the handle UTG_UK. So just before I move over and invite Helen, for those who don't know, the West of England Combined Authority has been a long-standing member of UTG, and it covers a geography such as cities of Bristol and Bath, beautiful part of the country, as well as many other places in North East Somerset and South Gloucestershire. And the organisation is politically led by Mayor Helen Godwin, and I am pleased, Helen, to welcome you to the podcast today.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. So let's jump in to questions straight away. And the first thing is getting to know a bit about you. Now, I came down to visit yourselves about a month ago. I mean, I love the city, I love the area, but I was really impressed by the energy that WECA, let's use acronyms as we're doing transport, WECA is bringing, and you can feel it very much within the organisation. But first off, you've worked in the private sector. So what made you switch, number one, from going to a hugely successful career in the private sector to wanting to be the mayor?
Well, I've had a sort of mixed career. So I was in the private sector for a long time after I graduated, and I was in the same organisation for sort of 17 years, and genuinely was always interested in politics, but didn't think of it as a career, and not, if I had thought of it as a career, probably would have been as a civil servant, not as a politician. But I went on maternity leave in about 2010, which is not really what you would expect as the moment to think about going into politics. But it was obviously the sort of changeover from New Labour to the coalition government. I was on maternity leave and I was helping in the campaign a little bit. And at that point, Sadiq Khan was my MP because I lived in Tooting in London then. And as happens in the Labour Party, you get very quickly coerced from sort of doing leaflets to having lots and lots of jobs to do. And so that was the kind of beginning. And then I moved back to Bristol, which is where I'd grown up, a couple of years after that. And again, sort of got involved in kind of organising, but then became a councillor on Bristol City Council, and was asked to join the Mayor Rees's cabinet as lead for children and young people. And I did that for 5 years, did that full time, really enjoyed it whilst the kids were young. And then I went back into the private sector, as you say, to PwC, where I did a lot of local government consulting, and genuinely thought, I'd done politics and I hadn't thought about coming back into it. And then the sort of stars align as they do, and this opportunity came up, and genuinely I felt as if it was something that I could do really well, and that I had seen through my work actually at PwC. I'd seen, by working especially in Greater Manchester, I did some work with GM around the Manchester Baccalaureate, the sort of skills pathways, and I saw, going into Manchester on the train, and sort of walking through the centre of Manchester, I could see physically what devolution could be. And as somebody from the west of England, I think it's fair to say this is an example of when you don't grab devolution by the horns. So you know, the combined authority, has been established since 2017. So we're not new to this, but we had never really kind of gone in all guns blazing in the way that Manchester, Liverpool, West Yorkshire, have all done. And so when this sort of opportunity came up, and it's obviously a long process because you have to be selected, then there's the long election campaign and then the election, I thought this has got to be our moment. If we don't get it right this time, so I'm the third mayor of the West of England, we're going to get ignored, and we had a new government. We had a sort of new opportunity to for devolution to go even deeper, which we're seeing in real time now. And so I just wanted to be here to kind of really try and drive that through and do things differently.
And given that, I think you've said, how important for you personally is it to be someone who sort of knows the fabric of the area, your family, you live there? How important is it for you to sort of bring that to the role? And does that help drive sort of your, before we go into transport, some of the specific, does it help drive your thinking around what you want to see in the vision?
Oh, 100%, because my lens is my own experience as a resident, but also, because, I'm lucky that my entire family, cousins, everyone is here. So every single thing I do, or every place that I'm thinking about, I've got a picture in my mind of how that place looks, feels, what those experiences are. Like, I know that my cousin's kids live in a rural village outside of Bath, and I know that to go to college in Bath next year, they're in year 11, there's no route for them. There's no public transport route. So it's completely, everything has a depth of colour to it because it's a real experience. And hilariously, when I told my mum that I was going for this job, she went, "They're just going to talk to you about buses, Helen." And then I think about half an hour later, my sister came into my mum's and went, "I've just told the girls, in this village up the road, and they just said about the buses." And I was like, okay, so here we go. So my mum was right. People do talk about the buses, but that's because, as a region, we have a poor public transport system. So people want to see that change. And that's what I'm most associated with in this job, is being in charge of the buses. So I better do something about it, hadn't I?
Well, you can tell us more about that as we go through the podcast, because you're right. West of England, it has a unique geography because you're a gateway to you're not just vibrant cities, but it's really rich in culture, history. I mean, if listeners haven't been to Bath, you've got to go. If you haven't been to Bristol, I love Bristol, probably one of the most vibrant sort of areas in the country. But also, you've got that beautiful countryside, and just on the edge of the Cotswolds and things like that. When you look at the region, I know you've recently sort of released your local growth plan. What does that unique geography, do you think, makes your combined authority probably a little bit different to some of the other ones, what you've said?
Yeah, and it's something I thought about a lot, kind of when I was campaigning, and since I've been in this job, what is it? What is this place? Who are we? What are we about? And you're right. We've got a very different history to some of the other combined authority areas. And obviously, we're a bit of an island. We don't have any other combined authorities around us. There's Cambridge and Peterborough, but there's no real natural synchronicity between our places, I would say, apart from the kind of university innovation bit. Then we've got London, and we're one of those cities that doesn't have a problem with London. We're not trying to get upset about London getting this or that. We have quite a harmonious relationship, I would say. It's very, very close. It's an hour and 12 minutes now on the train, and there's a frequency, but we don't want to be it. And then you've got that great swathe of sort of the West Midlands and East Midlands, and then the Northern Mayors. And I think the history of our place is very different, and the sort of economic base is very different. So I know that, other mayors might have to try and unlock, old industrial land that's contaminated for housing. And that's a really big, expensive process. We've got a different challenge here. What we've always done is grow food. So there's a big role for us in terms of, food security and health, and, that the kind of the climate resilience and nature that's in our very bones. It's not just a kind of nice to have. It's who we are. We've also always traded. The port of Bristol was at one time, one of the country's main port. It still is in some ways, but you're talking about kind of unsavoury times as well. We've got a troubling history, but we move goods around. So our road network is almost, our key roads coming out of Bristol, like Bath Road, Cheltenham Road, Gloucester Road, they're roads that take stuff from here to another place, or goods from farms to here to go out to the port. So that the whole place is built around sort of food production, trade. And then we've also got this really iconic history around kind of innovation and invention and engineering. So you think about Brunel's suspension bridge, Templemead Station, the SS Great Britain boat is here. So there's that real transport, sort of legacy. But then also, we're the home of Concorde. So, Airbus is still a big employer, and we design things here. And, so we're more kind of innovation, design, engineering than we are heavy steelworks or something like that. And so our kind of
unique dynamism as well. I mean, that's it. It brings a dynamism to the area, does it? I think, and that's something I take away from Europe. When I came down, there's a particular dynamism which you've articulated around the west of England, which I don't think you'd probably get in some other areas. That's not putting those other areas down, but it's quite unique.
I think, Jason, that it's somewhere that people choose to live. And I think that adds a different kind of energy. So, listen, we've got low income areas. We've got 35% of our kids are growing up in poverty. This is not utopia. There are real challenges here, inequalities within our places. But our baseline means that, we are an economically successful place, and people come here. Lots of people that grow up here choose to live here. People that come to university stay here. I think we've still got the highest retention rates in the country, 4 incredible universities, 2 in Bath, 2 in Bristol. And then, people want to bring up their families here. So we get a lot of internal migration, from London, from other big cities, because people say this is somewhere that actually for my kids, this is going to be a great place to grow up. And so all of that sort of desire to be here and desire to make a good life because you've chosen to put down your roots here, or you've chosen to kind of invest emotionally in somewhere, that of course does bring an energy. So we do have lots of startups. We've got the relationship between the university in terms of the research that they can do, and then supporting businesses to spin out and scale up. That's all embedded here. And I think the fact that we choose to live a certain way. So we're almost like a sort of seaside town, in that last week, I always call it the sort of Guinness to cider day. So it's the day when everyone moves from drinking Guinness in the winter to kind of the first cider of the year. And so when that happens, and it happened last week, the whole place is transformed. And Bath has this huge tourism industry, which is kind of quite consistent. But in Bristol, there's a day where suddenly everyone's on the harbour after work, and it's like Flying Ant Day. It just happens. Yeah. And we're all right with that. We indulge in that. We like things to go a bit slower in the summer months. We think about the kind of solstices. We think about the clocks changing, the birds coming back. Those are really big moments kind of in our culture as well. So it does add something different. And maybe it's about connection to nature, and also celebration of diversity. That port has given us, almost 100 languages, and we've lots of embedded communities that we are really comfortable celebrating and wanting to integrate.
It's a real melting pot, and that's why I love Bristol. And some people may just go through on the way to the southwest and to Cornwall and Penzance. But I would say to listeners, I'm not doing that. I'm not being paid to advertise the local area.
You go ahead.
Would definitely stop off on the way. One thing I want to pick up though, talking about where transport fits in that vision. When I came down, and it's something which you've spoken about and it's layered through sort of your subsequent strategies in the importance of supporting the everyday economy. Right? That's a really big thing. Do you want to talk a bit about why you think, like how you see what the everyday economy is, and where you see transport as really important to help support people who work in the everyday economy?
Yeah, no. So when we sort of started work on our growth strategy last year, and I think about 3 days after I was elected, I was given a choice, like, do you want officers to just crack on with this and it will be a sort of dry document that we deliver to MHCLG because we have to, or do you want to get involved with it and it becomes kind of your vision for what we're going to achieve? And so obviously I went for the latter option. And so we started to think about our growth zones, so our places that we could really see where there was potential for our economy to grow, to build communities, and to get the right sort of connectivity in place. And then we started to think about our growth sectors, and we tried to align it to the government's industrial strategy, but also to think about, what are the sectors that we can really get behind and support as well. And then it kind of struck me that we were only talking to less than half of our population in those sectors. And so we started to explore how we would talk about what we landed on as the everyday economy. And we talked about the core economy, and then we sort of almost went with foundational economy until I talked to a cabinet member who said, "Oh, you mean steel?" And I was like, "Oh God, no, I don't mean steel. I mean everything." So that we've been that and went with the everyday economy, which seems to have worked and landed. But really what sits underneath that in my mind is three very loose pillars. Yeah. One of which is around sort of logistics, distribution, transport, manufacturing, how we get stuff, how we make stuff and get it places. The other one is around health, social care, education, childcare, which are, lifelines to make everything else work. And then we thought about hospitality, culture, visitor economy, retail. So all of the kind of things that make enjoyable, life enjoyable. And essentially the everyday economy employs over half our population, and nothing happens in that future economy space unless you have this bit working. Yeah. So that for me was really key. But obviously, if you think about that, the population that work in that sector, there's a higher percentage are going to be taking public transport, and need flexibility around public transport as well. So it's another driver to focus on transport. But we also identified when we did the work for the growth strategy that our 4 barriers to growth were housing, were skills, the right skills, commercial space, and of course transport and connectivity. And transport is the one that unlocks everything, because we can't build houses further out of town and tell people who currently live in the city centres to go and live there if they then can't get back into town for work. And so that connectivity is where we've had the underinvestment, where government haven't really noticed us because we're seen as somewhere successful, but actually we're starting to stagnate potentially because the house prices here are so expensive. Then we have our you're at risk of a brain drain, and more importantly, in some ways, we're at risk of people who have grown up here not being able to settle here and not be able to do those jobs in the everyday economy, which enable us all to move around and feel safe. So we're a success story, but almost burning ourselves out. And so that's where those interventions really need to come in.
And that's a really important point, actually, because it's you're starting from a point of the region starting point from a sort of a benchmark of being successful, and that's really important to get across because of all the things that you've said. And what struck me about the everyday economy when we came down and how you talk about it is I like those three pillars, the way you described it, because they're all interlinked. And if you support how people can move who do jobs every day, these are the backbone of our economy, to support all the other things. I think that's really good. But I like the point where you also have to adapt to stop the burnout of the region, and you have to, building from success, how would you propel forward? But when you look at transport in that perspective, and it's something you said earlier on, and earlier on in the interview, like black spots, where are the, how do you, are there any specific black spots you feel there are across the economy? And then one of the things you've committed to through your vision, your transport vision, is talks about trust. Do you feel an obligation on trying to fix that, and so people trust you in delivering, to not just fix some of those black spots, but actually deliver a vision which they can buy in and trust?
Yeah. So I might take the trust one first, because it leads to the black spots, I think, in the sense that so we've got, buses are our key thing. That's how people get around in the region. And we also don't have a particularly strong suburban rail network. Although, you know, my predecessors have really invested in that, and we are on the cusp of something, you know, very exciting, I think, around that. So you end up as a place where it's kind of the bus or car that becomes your option for people. And then we've had this sort of 30-year flirtation with the concept of mass transit, but we've never quite made the leap. And so the trust bit sits across all of that. So there's no trust in getting in your car and getting from A to B, because the congestion's so bad, and the potholes now obviously are so bad. There's no trust in the bus service, because will it turn up? We've got ghost buses, and you're still stuck in loads of traffic, and you know that feels like you're kind of making an altruistic choice to get the bus sometimes. If you have a choice, not everyone does, but if you do have a choice, it feels like you're being the good guy, because it's going to take you twice as long to get there. That's just a fact. But we've also got rural communities who are completely cut off and isolated. So, and then the mass transit thing, why would anyone trust that I'm going to do anything about that? Because we've talked about it for all their lives and nothing's ever come of it. You know, we lost our trams in the war and we didn't get them back again. So that's a very long time. So that the distrust or mistrust is like embedded in the system, right? So and that sort of healthy amount of cynicism, apathy that kind of exists. So that's your sort of starting point, which isn't great. And then, you know, we are both Bristol and Bath are in the most congested cities in the country. We have done a lot around active travel and bus priority. So there have been, for the last few years, a lot of roadworks. And, you know, that is the right answer to get people on public transport, but there's a huge amount of pain. And, you know, the way this society works at the moment is no one is thinking, well, I don't mind this pain for 10 years because it means my kids will be able to get on the bus. You know, that's not how people think right now, is it? Because, you know, we're all kind of up against it every day, and the world moves so quickly. And so there is a sort of chicken and egg that we have to deal with. But also, I think we haven't before told the story of what you're going to get at the end of it. What is the win? So it's patchy and it's messy, and then there are physical black spots. So there are like bits of the region that, you know, every morning are going to be on the travel news, and you know there's no quick fix for them. There's also that seasonal thing comes in, I think. So the minute, you know, you have dark nights or dark mornings, you know, the traffic goes up, whereas in the summer people here do tend to walk, get the bus, cycle. You know, there's a real shift, which I know there'll be in every city, but I wonder if it's kind of more pronounced in our region. So there are definitely kind of arterial roads or trunk roads that I would say, oh God, you know, there's stuff we need to do here to fix it. And we're now starting to develop that out, but I also need to balance that longer term planning with speed of delivery, because I need people to start to trust me, the organisation and the network, to get that patronage that we then can.
They want to feel the difference.
I want them to feel the difference. And we did, last summer we did Kids Go Free on our buses, which was something that I wanted to do something really quickly after winning the election. I wanted to do something that felt like it was, kind of quite transactional in a sense, that I was giving the public something that would help them along a bit. And we did Kids Go Free throughout the school holidays. And then we did it again at Christmas, and we're going to do it again at Easter. And now we've got our 3-year bus funding. We can kind of make that a bit of a longer term thing. But we got, I think, over summer and Christmas, 1.1 million kids travelled for free on our buses.
That's amazing.
Which out of 150,000 is the number of kids in that category. So and then in the areas where we have lowest incomes, which is where we really wanted to see the shift, we had increases of 98%.
Yeah. Wow.
So it worked. So kids, kids that had said to me when I was, back in the day when I was a counsellor, it's all very well having the Harbour Festival, which is free, but my mum says we can't afford to get there because of the cost of the bus. And so the answer was, okay, we'll make the bus free for all of these amazing summer events. And
what age did it go up to? What was the age?
Up to 16. So
16.
So when the adult fare kicks in. But I think what worked really, really well, obviously 0 to 5s are free anyway, but there was no ticket, there was no pass, there was no pre-registration. You didn't have to be with an adult. So we just said to kids, just get on the bus. And I think as a mum of 3 kids between sort of 11 and 16, and primarily the older 2 used it last summer, but these are COVID kids, right? So these are kids that maybe are a little bit more anxious. They've had a bit of a funny childhood, like the world's on fire type thing. But so many parents were able to say to me, oh God, just the fact I didn't have to worry about what they were doing, they were just getting on the bus. And my son said, we're going busing today.
Yeah.
Fine, have fun.
And was I correct as well that businesses also saw an increase in footfall?
Yeah. So we had some really good economic data back. And interestingly, especially in the sort of towns outside of Bristol and Bath. So, the places where maybe like kids live in the village and there was, there's only 1 or 2 buses a day, but they were going in and checking out those towns, or people were going out maybe from Bristol and Bath into other places. So it really genuinely was good news all round. And over Christmas, because Christmas was a shorter holiday, bank holidays, Christmas dark, cold, we really didn't expect, the same sort of response. But actually, I think we had 288,000 free journeys over Christmas. And, that's kids maybe being taken into town to see the lights for the first time, or going to see the Panto, and the Panto suddenly becomes more affordable. So, it's the right thing to do, but it's hitting the right communities, which I think we did and we're doing. But it's also, for me, those kids, some of those kids will now get on the bus to school where they wouldn't have felt confident enough to do that before. So it's the passenger
behaviour for the long term. Yeah, definitely.
It's the customers of the future. That's the reality. Like we need to be thinking about, when we do these bus surveys and all this sort of thing, it's all very well sort of going out and making sure that we're hearing from people, but I want to hear from the 14, 15-year-olds, because they're going to be, that's the next generation of customers and public transport users, right? And some of these kids won't be able to afford cars, and getting a car is not as easy as it was. Driving lessons cost 40 quid an hour or something now, someone was telling me. So public transport is a public service. We need to get it right for everyone.
And if government are listening, then maybe they should look at what you've done as a case study.
They should.
of how they can support an intervention. And one thing I was going to ask, obviously you, many of our members are looking to do franchising, but you don't feel that at the minute that's probably the right thing, if that's right to say, for your area. What are your plans for the bus? Because it is the backbone of any transport system.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the first thing to say on this is you're right. I didn't campaign on a ticket of I will push the button on franchising on day one or anything like that. I probably was sort of uber pragmatic about it. And the reality is that we are primarily a rural region. So we are not, the big comparison is Manchester, isn't it? Everybody looks at what's happened with transport in Manchester, and that's it's hugely successful. I love coming to Manchester. I love how easy public transport is. I want that for our region.
Yeah.
But we have a different exam question to solve, which is, how do you make that wash its face when we've got two very dense areas of population, and then lots and lots of spread out, over a big geography? How do you make that model work? And so the answer is going to be different. We don't have an existing mass transit infrastructure. So you're talking about buses. Now, I also, the combined authority as an entity hasn't entered public consciousness here in the way that it would have done in GM or London or maybe some of the other places now as well. And so for me to precept, which is what we would need to do to push the button on it, I don't think that's the right thing. I don't feel that we have done enough to ask people to pay an extra tax, essentially, to do franchising. I don't think we've made the case. That's not to say we'll never be in that position, but I would rather explore what we can do through a really, I'm looking for a groundbreaking enhanced partnership plus at the moment. That's what we're working on, and we'll be starting to work on more intensely. I've got some red lines around that if I don't get them in, then I know I've got another option, which is to look at franchising. But for now, I want to explore that and make sure that we can build the right network for our region. We've had some really good wins in terms of the zebra funding. So we're soon going to be around 250 electric double deckers here. Wow. Which I think is probably up there with anywhere else. We've got some good fare incentives. We've got, we're working really hard on the infrastructure to support bus priority. So there is investment going in. I think we're out now of agency drivers. The recruitment is kind of working. So we're starting to build something, and we're doing some live work right now around how do we have that urban bus network working, but then how do we design the right rural services that are likely to be sort of DRT, at least in part, but how do we design something that can be trusted again by those people that don't live in the urban centres, both as a way of getting around their communities, but also so that they can interchange and then get onto bus services that will take them, to school, hospital, college. But again, the trust bit. So, how do we get somebody who lives in a village to trust that the DRT is going to turn up and get her to where he or she needs to be? And then how can she wait at that next bus stop knowing that the main bus into Bath is going to turn up? Where can how does that person feel safe? How do we make sure that's well lit? How do we make sure there's a public loo? How do we make sure they can get a coffee whilst they're waiting? All of those things are as important, I think, than the kind of model that we use. So I really want to get into that kind of passenger experience, and design that out. And if we can't get there using EP Plus, then we'll look at what could franchising do for us. And we're not closing any doors to it, but I just need to keep twin tracking, because I also want speedy delivery, and we all know that franchising takes a long time as well.
I think it's a really pragmatic approach. I think the main thing, and we did a lot of work on legislation, our philosophy was give the areas the choice of what they want to do. And enhanced partnerships can deliver to some really cracking enhanced partnerships in the country. Franchising won't be right for certain effort for everywhere. Enhanced partnerships have got a lot, and I think the government over the past year has invested more about how they can do. There's a new buses bill or new buses act of what they can do to support areas that want to do that. So I think I'm confident the future is looking really bright for bus. I'm excited about bus, and I think your area is so unique that I think you could be a really good test bed for what can work. in a combined authority along with probably someone like East Mids around. How do you do where you've got two strong urban centres but surrounded by quite a rural area? One thing, got to move on from bus, if that's okay, and you've mentioned it a few times, is mass transit. Mass transit can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. And I live in Manchester, and we have a tram here, and I use it every day. But for you, how important is mass transit as sort of, I hate to talk about technical and mode, but that's like, how important is mass transit as part of the overall transport mix to you and Wecker?
Yeah, it's really, really important. And we launched our transport vision probably a month or so ago now, I think. And the way that we kind of set out the vision was in layers. So, we've talked about buses key, rail. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about rail, building out that truly suburban rail network. And then we talked about mass transit. Then we talked about active travel. Then we talked about sort of streets and roads. So mass transit has to be up there. Like, we have to be talking about it in the same breath that we're talking about rail and bus, because, as I said at the beginning, people need to believe that we're going to do something. And we've had, there's the kind of the legend around Nottingham, and that funding was ours. We couldn't make our decision, fell out. Two councils fell out, and then the money went to Nottingham, and here we are 30 years later still without anything. So I have been, you can probably tell I'm a bit of an arch pragmatist at this point, but we have been mode agnostic intentionally, because what I didn't want to do was just kind of pick a mode when I don't know the right answer. I don't know I'm not a civil engineer. I don't know what the right thing is for this place. And we've already discussed, we don't have like huge swathes of 6-lane roads that we can take over. We most of our network is 2-lane, and so if you take something out, you're taking it out fully. So I need to understand that before we make any big declarations. So what we've done in our transport vision is start from the position of where do we think we need something additional? Where's that additionality? Where does it need to be? So we've talked about the airport, because our airport is not served by any form of mass rapid transit. It's just got a double-decker bus that goes out from Temple Meads up to the airport, and most people drive there. That's the reality. So that car parking is a big thing. So obviously we want to change that, but also I want to improve the experience of people landing at Bristol Airport and going out into the region. I want that to feel better and more exciting and more commensurate with our region and where we're at. So that's a really important route, I think. There's also, we've been shortlisted for Newtown up at Brabazon and the West Innovation Arc. Really exciting stuff up there. So we've got, we're looking at kind of up to, could be anywhere between 20 and 40,000 homes. We've got the Aviva Arena is coming in early or late 28. That's going to bring hordes of people into that area, regularly. We've got university there. We've got Bristol Parkway Station. We've got the Bristol and Bath Science Park. So there's a lot going on up there. And, we've got a ring road, but putting some form of rapid transit on that, I think, is really significant, and that's kind of in my mind as somewhere that we need to think about. And then we've got Bristol City Centre. Is there an option here? We've done all that bus prioritisation work. We've got the segregation. Can we adapt that into something a bit more exciting? And then the Bristol to Bath corridor, which is also, full of black spots in terms of congestion. So in my mind, and that's what we've set out in the transport vision, that's where we go. But importantly, that starts to link up those growth zones I talked about at the beginning as well. So so we're talking about housing and we're talking about commerce and industry, but that kind of, so they're the routes to enable all of that to happen. And then we've got Summer Valley, which sits right at the bottom of the region on the border with Somerset. So you kind of go Frome, Wells, Glastonbury, that kind of area. And then Midsummer Norton Radstock sits in the Wecker area. And that, the connectivity between there and somewhere like Bath is really, really poor. So we need to think about that as well. And we want to unlock that as one of our growth zones. things. So there is pragmatism in it, but whatever works. So the priorities, I guess, are kind of what works from a structural perspective, what is financially feasible. And, you know, this is all about what we put in for our kind of ask in the next spending review. So this is all the work that we're doing right now. And also what works from an engineering perspective. You know, let's be really clear about it. It needs to function. So that's kind of where we are on it. But we've got, for the first time ever, we've got a head of mass transit in the authority. So someone's full-time job is to be working on that. And I know through our membership of UTG, you know, we're able to link in with other places and you know, get some of that best practice, and that's already proving really helpful.
And I think you're right. I think I don't think there's anything wrong being an arch pragmatist, because in many ways, I think you have a unique geography. You have a unique topography. Bristol isn't flat. Trust me, my calves are pretty. After a weekend,
shocker how many people cycle, because I'm not.
It's a hill of hills. It's a city of hills. But
same with Bath as well. I should say, like the whole region, you know, is hilly.
It's hilly, and I think because of that. As you said, and this comes back to sort of the cultural heritage of the area and the history, you do have quite tight road space. So thinking a bit cleverly about actually what is the demand from what you want to do from the growth zones across the region. And then I like what you said, like, if you're going to take something out, you have to make it work. Like if you're going to put something in, it's got to wash its face and make it work. So I think that approach is really helpful. I think one question which has just come in, I'll ask it now. Well, we usually ask it the question at the end, but I think someone said, you may not be aware, have you ever thought of very light rail? So I'd just say put very light rail. And I went to visit it in Dudley. And so that is probably in the mix as well, is it? In terms of thinking?
Yeah. Nothing is ruled out. Like, that's the beauty of this, really. And I think probably, you know, it's probably frustrating for some people as well, because we haven't ruled anything out or anything in. That probably makes people think we're further away than we are. But really, at this stage, it would be daft for me to say, oh, no, that's not for us. You know, my poor Emma Blackham, who you know is our executive director of transport, every day I'm sending her something I've seen on Instagram. What about this? Should we do this? She's like, and half of it I think is not even real. But anyway, so she, you know, so we are in that ideas mode. But then I've got, you know, having a head of mass transit whose day job it is, you know, he's the serious guy who's filtering all of this out. And very light rail is absolutely something that we want to look at. Why would we rule that out, you know, at this point? So it's kind of nothing's off the table, but I've got to balance that with delivery. So, you know, we can't spend 10 years doing business cases and just having chats about it, because that spending review is coming, and I want Heidi to see something from me that says, okay, this is where they're headed.
Basically.
Exactly.
Get behind.
Exactly that.
Conscious of time, and I want to just ask a few more things. I want to talk about rail. I know we mentioned it. So I think you've got quite a unique rail network, actually, in the southwest. And I know you've got some new stations coming on board. But do you want to talk a bit about where rail fits in this vision? Because I think you said at the start, it's not the predominant mode how people travel, but you think it's probably got a bigger part to play effectively.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we've got this sort of rich heritage, you know, Great Western Railway, Brunel, Temple Meads, you know, we are kind of in some ways, you know, sort of one of the homes of rail. And we've also got this another sort of geographical foible for us, is that because the merchants over in Queen Square didn't want the station coming in to disturb their peace, Bristol Temple Meads is in utterly the wrong place. So, you know, we've got that kind of 500 metre walk where, you know, things don't look that pretty. And it's like, really, am I here? This is not that great compared to when you go into Bath, actually, which I think has got the dream. You know, you come right into the middle of the Georgian city and everything's there. So rail, you know, there is a heritage. There is obviously, you know, the 60s and the end of a lot of the railway lines. And again, not really having the kind of momentum to do anything about that since. So we have the Combined Authority has been quite proactive in rail. We've got a really good rail team here. So we've opened a new Park and Ride rail station. We've opened a new station. We've got Abbeywood, which sort of serves the big MOD site. We've got another station on that line that's been open. And then we've got the Porter's Head line, which is one of these kind of romantic, there are people that have been campaigning on this for kind of 30, 40 years who... Yeah. They cannot believe it's actually happening, but that is going to give us 2 new stations within the next 18 months, I think, all being well. And that opens up, another town really, and brings that into the city. So that gives a huge number of commuters the opportunity to get a train. We did the naming last week of the new station, Bristol Brabazon, which is going to serve the Arena and the Brabazon New Town. So that's really exciting. And then we've got another 2 stations that are, work is starting on them. And then we think there's probably potential for another 2. So we are kind of, we're really motoring on this. We've got an excellent relationship with Network Rail, good relationship with GWR. Obviously, they'll all become GBR at some point. But we're also, again, being pragmatic because, Bristol Temple Meads, 15 platforms. We've got to think about capacity there, and we've got to think about, well, what are the solutions? So by looking at stations beyond Temple Meads, does that help with some of that capacity issue? Can we turn trains around at the end of a line and keep them flowing through? So we're trying to be good partners, but also good conveners in terms of trying to bring those solutions through. And it's that combination for me of three elements. There's the frequency, which I think is all very well building stations, but if you're only ever thinking about 1 an hour, that's not going to change things. Yes, the stations, which I think unlock places, they unlock housing opportunities. It's that's good news. And then also rolling stock is the other thing, because we want to be near the front of the queue for new stock, looking at electrification, looking at battery operated, like trying to make sure that, if we're going to do this stuff, let's do it in a way that's really sustainable, both in terms of, green, but also longer term sustainability as well. So
and it builds on the heritage and the innovation of Bristol being a city built on the back of transport and rail in many ways.
Yeah. And rail is romantic, right? Like people like getting trains. If they know they're going to turn up, people like them. And so, again, having experience living in South London for a long time where, that is your primary kind of commuting route, going on the overground, and spending a bit of time between sort of Leeds and Manchester and seeing those commuter trains operate, which I know are not great service wise, but as an infrastructure it's good. And so for me it's kind of like I want to bring that into the mix, and I think we've got a really good opportunity to do that. And I think once we get the Porter's Headline open, that's the moment where people will really believe, because that's a campaign since the 60s, and it is going to happen.
It'll feel tangible. It'll feel different.
Yeah, exactly. So those 3 combined, if we get the buses right, if we can get the rail where it needs to be, which is happening surprisingly quickly, and then we can do something really quick on mass transit where we can get to proof of concept if it's something new and different, or if it's glider buses or bendy buses or whatever, and we can get that up and running quite quickly, then before you know it, you've got a suite of options for people, which starts to unlock the region in a different way.
And adds that trust. I love the glider. I think glider's brilliant.
I've been looking at them, they're good.
Have you been to Northern Ireland? If you haven't been to see it, then we need to get you across there, because Transit remember, and it's a great thing. Really good. Right, conscious of time, so 2 very quick things I just want to touch. First one is active travel, and then wrap up with a bit on Devo. You were part of you signed up with other mayors around pledging to create a national network of safe walking and wheeling, and you welcomed Chris Boardman and ATE, Active Travel England. Given that you are quite a hilly area though, but that and there's e-bikes. Where does active travel, walking, wheeling and cycling fit into your mix?
Yeah, it's fundamental, and I really like how Chris sort of talks about, you know, walking. That is the thing. You know, if people can feel safe and can get from A to B and choose to be active, you know, because it feels like the right thing to do, and it doesn't feel that, you know, that there's no risk in that, then that's really fundamental. So we have, you know, we adopted school streets back in oh gosh, I don't know, 2021, I think, when I was cabinet member for children. So I did that with our cabinet lead for transport. I really like the idea of child safe zones. I really like the idea of kind of building out from school streets and thinking about how do we connect, and Chris talks about this a lot, how do we connect those kids with school, home, play, and their local high street in a way that feels super safe. So really big fan of school streets, really good fan of interventions like side road crossings. I really like the proposal, you know, Lillian Greenwood is talking about kind of pavement parking and having powers to be able to say no to that. And I quite like that kind of spilling out from those school streets and kind of creating these spaces that just feel that little bit safer. And I love the, you know, the colourful infrastructure and the kind of, you know, the thinking about a child first lens in some of that. So that is really important to me, and I, you know, it's something that is part of the transport vision, and we're thinking about at the moment how we can do a mix of that some of those bigger active travel kind of infrastructure type schemes. But I really want to find a way, and David Scaife in North Yorkshire, I think, has done this really well, of kind of going out into the community and saying, what do you want around active travel? What would make, you know, more kids come and use your leisure centre, or allow parents to feel comfortable letting the kids come into this skate park, you know, if there was some active travel infrastructure around that. So I'm really keen to kind of bridge that gap between us and residents, and thinking about active travel, walking, wheeling, cycling, and what it can mean kind of hyper locally as well as part of the network. So that's kind of where I want to head on that. It's less formed at the moment because we've got really significant kind of infrastructure, and I took Chris on a kind of walking tour of the city centre, and I know they've been down to South Gloucestershire and to Bath. We've got these amazing green bike lanes in South Gloucestershire, which are you know, really significant in terms of like identifying, okay, that's, you know, that's their space, this is mine. I think that makes a real difference. So I want to kind of embed that in everything we do.
Yeah, it's really important. And in many ways, we use the term active travel. Most people probably, I mean, my mum and dad didn't know what it meant. They just walk or get my mum don't get a bike now, but do you know what I mean? So making it a little bit more real is probably really a really good approach. I think the final thing then, before probably bringing a few audience questions, is we've talked a lot about transport and obviously UTG, this is the whole purpose, but Devo. Devolution is big, local government reform, lots of things going on. It can be quite bombarding overall when you work in it. It's quite like, wow, what's going on? But in terms of your ambition for West of England Combined Authority, what you want for the region, what do you is WECA ready for greater autonomy? What do you want the government to do to actually supercharge what your ambitions are effectively in that devolution sort of devolution landscape?
Yeah, so we're in a unique, not a unique situation, but we're in a funny situation in that we're one of the original kind of combined authorities, as I said, set up in 2017. But we are not an established combined authority, and that's because of, you know, previous history and you know, things that happened before my time. So if you think of sort of devolution as a kind of league table, you know, obviously Greater Manchester and West Midlands are at the top of that. They've got their integrated settlements. They've got, you know, lots of powers that we don't have at the moment. And then you've got that next tranche, you know, West Yorks, South Yorks, Liverpool, and what's the other one that I've forgotten? Oh, North East, that are all getting their kind of integrated settlement imminently. And we're sort of just...
For listeners, integrated for people who don't know, it's where you could have greater power over not just transport but skills and other bits, other funding.
So you get your money, in a lump sum, and then you decide how to spend it, rather than getting little pots of money that you're told you've got to spend that on that or that on that. So my absolute priority at the minute is getting us to that established status, which then enables us to get our integrated settlement. So I'm kind of operating in that kind of I'm fighting for a Champions League place, if we're going to use football analogies. Like, I'm trying to get in there. So that's my primary kind of concern at the moment. And then the other challenge that we've got is that, unlike a lot of places, because of our sort of difficult earlier history, I suppose, we don't have that natural identity and that natural coterminosity. So the health footprint doesn't align with the boundaries here. The police footprint doesn't align with the boundaries here. Right. So in terms of how I can make sure that everything that we do, you know, sits in that space of trying to create a better place, trying to think about prevention around health, trying to think about prevention around crime, trying to make sure that kids that grow up in poverty, you know, aren't then kind of on a path that we can't get them off of. So trying to get the data that sits around all of this is really, really difficult. So I think that sort of coterminosity and getting the established status, those are my kind of like immediate needs and asks. Later on, I think the overnight visitor levy, really exciting. I think that's an opportunity for us to actually think about transport. How do we get our people that serve that visitor economy, nighttime economy, how do we get those people home? Like, can we, you know, as we've got more autonomy, can we start to fund transport in a different way and make different choices about how we spend our money? And then obviously, you know, the conversations last week, the Devo bill in itself is massive. There's going to be lots in there for us to unpack. And the Rachel Reeves's announcement last week at the Mays lecture around, you know, potentially retaining some of our tax receipts, you know, whether that's business rates, income tax, whatever. That's hugely exciting because it gives us the ability to borrow against it, which is where your mass transit ambitions start to really accelerate.
Borrow to invest, basically.
Exactly that. Yeah, invest to save, as we used to call it, you know, in councils. So there's something really powerful about that. We are ready because even though we're not established, we are established because we've been here since 2017. So I've got incredible people out there who are ready to really take this on. And you know, there is a sense, I hope it's beyond this building and in the wider region. I feel like we're getting there of this is a real moment for the west of England. And, you know, we are finally having the confidence to put our heads above the parapet and say we're a really good place actually, and this is where you should invest, and this is where you government should make a contribution, because the return on investment from here is going to be a lot quicker and a lot higher than it might be from some other places. And I need government to really kind of come and see us and to listen to that.
Well, I don't think you could have sold that any better. Fantastic. So very quick, I know we've only got 2 minutes, being very gracious at time. So a very quick question from Robert. How closely do you connect with Wales?
Really closely. Yeah. So we did have this sort of quasi body called Western Gateway, which was set up by Marvin Rees, who was one of the mayors of Bristol, and Hugh over in Cardiff a few years ago, which sort of covered that wider area, and it sort of got quite big. But that obviously sort of was disbanded, but I've got a really good relationship with Cardiff Capital Region, which is the sort of 10 authorities, and actually Newport in particular, because so many people from southeast Wales travel into our region for work, because a lot of people have left our region to go there because of the, you know, it's a bit more affordable. So so at the moment, and Dimitri and I have spoken a bit about this, they've obviously got that investment to do the line out from Cardiff to Newport on the trains, and lots of new local stations there. I really love all the valleys. The valleys,
it's fantastic.
It's amazing.
Going on there. Yeah, amazing.
And so all of that. So, and then we're sort of focusing on our bit, but we're very intentional that doesn't mean we stop talking to each other. So that relationship is really important. And the identity bit, obviously, Wales is its own nation, its own government, but you know, there's a good connection between South Wales and this part of the world, and culturally we can connect and work really well together, so that's good.
Brilliant. And TIA Transport for Wales are a member of UTG, which really helps as well. They're a principal member, so lots of connections going on. So we've covered it all. I'm going to finish with one very final question to give you a final say. you are a mum of 3, proud family focus. What's the best piece of parenting wisdom that you have found that has unexpectedly helped you in the job that you do now?
Oh, God. Well, it's the patience of a parent, isn't it? It's the deep breaths while someone says something you don't agree with, and then you take a pause.
Do you know what?
It doesn't happen often.
I think you've hit that. I mean, I don't have kids. Maybe I should get some just to help me with that patience. But no, that was excellent. Well, I just want to say a big thank you.
Thank you
for lending your time to take part in the conversation. And just for our listeners, we have lots of other speakers lined up. From May onwards, we've got local elections in parts of the country, so we're going to wait until then. And a big thanks to Atkins Realis for supporting this Urban Transport Next series of conversations. And I thank you again, Helen. And you can download this on Spotify and stuff, everyone. Once we'll put it on Spotify in the next couple of days and people can have a listen. So that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.